Good morning, everyone, and happy Sunday. We are wrapping up with strategic, structural, and object relations. I know object relations is kind of like, it seems like it's an outlier with these two models, but that's okay because we're going to do a minor review. This is for those who could not join Monday's night study group. If you are unable to join any study group, please check my membership that I have. I am meeting with people one-to-one for study sessions. I do have a lot of different perks and stuff that are on my channel right now. So if you would like to support Failing is Not an Option, please check on my membership. Please give me a super thanks. All of the money that you are sending me is going to be going forward to continue to buy different study programs. I am trying to purchase a California study program so that I can help the others also effectively in California. I am also trying to buy new test banks and new questions banks so that when we do our study meets and stuff, I can have enough questions and stuff that is going to spread for everyone to be able to use. So please, my Cash App, my Zelle, and everything. I think that information is in my group, but if not, you can always ask me for it. I am accepting donations from across all boards so that I can continue to help people pass the MFT National Exam. So let's get started. Remember, this is just a minor review. We have been doing strategic and structural for the past, I want to say 2 weeks now, and only 1 week with object relations. So the very first thing that we're going to go through is foundational and the conceptual differences between strategic and structural. I still have some people telling me that they are kind of like getting strategic and structural confused together. So hopefully this will clear some things up. Now, this chart, I have it in a PDF format. Do not worry. I will post this chart in my Facebook group. If you are not in my Facebook group and would like this chart, please email me. My email is located on my YouTube channel. As well as if you are watching this from TikTok, send me a message. I will get these charts over to you. So let's take a look at these. We have, of course, we know some of the figures for strategic therapy is Jay Heyyyyy, Chloe, Milton, and the MRI group. Now, Milton Erickson and MRI is the ones that's before Jay Heyyyyy and Chloe. They paved the way for it. But in structural family therapy, you know it's just Salvador Minuchin, right? So our primary focus for strategic therapies is very different from structural family therapy. Solving the presenting problem, symptom relief, changing interactional sequences, disrupting those interactional sequences, that's all strategic therapy. Structural family therapy is about restructuring the family organization, changing the hierarchies, changing the boundaries, making sure that the boundaries are not fused, too far enmeshed. We need clear boundaries when it comes to structural family therapy. The view of the problem for strategic, repetitive, maladaptive interaction patterns that need to be disrupted. The view of the problem for structural, it's dysfunctional, enmeshed, disengaged boundaries. We got to work on that in order to alter that hierarchy. The therapist's role for strategic is going to be direct the expert. Remember, a strategic therapist is directing you, telling you what it is that you need to do. But for a structural family therapist, it's going to be more involved joining with the family and mapping the family structure, right? Remember, a structural family therapist will go with the family, go with the flow, dance with the family. But a strategic therapist is giving you these directions and you need to follow them. Goals of therapy. Changing interaction patterns in order to resolve the presenting problem is strategic. The main goal of strategic is symptom relief. Structural family therapy, we need to restructure the family system. We need to restructure the family system, those boundaries, and those hierarchies. The view of the family for strategic is going to be what? The system is maintaining some form of equilibrium, homeostasis, through the rules and all of the communication patterns that they have, which is going to be those behaviors that keep continuing to be in the same problem in the first place. In structural family therapy, the system is organized into different subsystems. You get the parental subsystem, spousal subsystem, sibling subsystem, grandparent subsystems. But with that, you have to be working on those boundaries in order to define some of those relationships, right? How does strategic therapy view change? The view change is by what? Directed tasks that therapist is going to give you. For structural therapy, change happens when that organization has been restructured with what? Involvement from the family as well as the therapist. They work together. Versus strategic, the therapist is just giving directives in order for this family to do what? Get symptom relief. That's the difference between those foundational concepts between strategic and structural therapy. Now, the techniques and the concepts and how we apply some of these techniques in strategic and structural are very different. If you have been in the group, if you've been working with me from the beginning, you know that one of the techniques in strategic and structural is both unbalancing. They both use it because remember, strategic draws from structural and vice versa and everything. But some of the interventions that strategic therapists use is far different from a structural therapist. Strategic therapist uses paradoxical interventions, that's ordeals, prescribing the symptoms, and things of that nature. Structural therapy, joining, enactments, restructuring, unbalancing, and boundary making is structural family therapy. Yes, both of these models draw from one another when it comes to the use of the hierarchy. In strategic family therapy, Jay Haley had this whole thing about how, I got to fix the parents, fix the kid. In order to do that, that hierarchy needed to be right where it was supposed to be. So that strategic therapist is going to manipulate that hierarchy temporarily in order to work on changing the patterns which needs to be disrupted. But in structural family therapy, it is all about focusing on restoring, altering, changing that hierarchy so that the system can be more healthier. The parental subsystem needs to be right where it's supposed to be, which is here, and the child is here. That is structural family therapy. We know the therapist stance. We just got finished talking about it. Strategic therapist, problem solving, expert, structural family therapy, joining, empathic, but directive, but still is going to be guiding and is a part of the system. The key concepts for strategic and structural are very different. Key concepts for strategic, you will see things like prescribing a symptom, symptom prescription, paradox, first order, second order change, positive connotation. Now, that's just from where? Milan, positive connotation. But here's the thing, and I want to make sure that I tell you this. I've seen questions that will just ask you what would a strategic therapist do in the middle phase of therapy. They don't say whether if it's Milan or MRI or something like that. It'll just be a strategic therapist. They'll stick a positive connotation in there. They'll stick positioning in there. If that's the best answer out of the four, then that is probably the best answer of the four. I've never seen a question that specifically says, as an MRI therapist, as a Milan therapist, what would you do? Especially when it comes to these mock questions. So pay close attention to that. Structural family therapy, key concepts, subsystems, boundary, rigid diffuse, coalition, triangulation. That's all structural. That will never be strategic. The assessment focus of strategic therapists, we need to be observing some of those interactional sequences that seems to be maintaining the problem. Assessment for structural therapy is looking at that family structure and the boundaries that the family members have between one another. And then those are just some of the typical questions that a strategic therapist would do or what a structural family therapist would do. Now, some of the famous examples, and I can talk in depth about these. Maybe I can do a video on these too. We know ordeal therapy, giving a symptom, a cost where it's going to be like less desirable, more desirable. But Minuchin also talked about psychosomatic families. He believed that if there was a child who had anorexia in the family, it was because the family was too far enmeshed. That's a whole nother story. We'll talk about it another time. But that sums it up between the differences between those techniques, okay? Now, object relations theory. We've been working on object relations theory in the group. We have not spoken about this together yet, and that's okay. but we're just going to go over some of the core concepts and the foundations of this theory. The founders of the theories is going to be, of course, Melanie and James Framo. Those other two that you see up there are maybe well before that, well before those two. And I learned about those two through the Family Solutions Institute. So if you've ever used the Family Solutions Institute book or their questions, then those two people that you see, other than James and Melanie, you're going to hear a lot about them. The core idea for object relations theory is just the early relationships with your objects or your caregivers or your parents. That's all meaning the same thing. They shape how we are going to relate to others in our present life. The primary focus is going to be repairing some of those internalized early object relationships that we have and how it influences now our current family interactions, friends interactions, employees, whoever the case may be. So growing up as a kid, you had an object. But growing up as a kid, if that object was very critical to you, you would split yourself. Good object, bad object. You internalize that. But now in object relations, we have to work on healing and repairing that. Object relations view the problem as unresolved internal conflicts from your objects. Again, how you were treated as a kid, how you were spoken to as a kid, what you witnessed as a kid, you internalize it, and now it possibly impacts your current relationships that you have right now. I'm sorry, I'm turning off my phone. View of the family interactions, they mirror each member's internalized objective world, right? But if you were to take that and look at it, you are reenacting that within the family system, within the people that you have in your life. One of the goals of therapy, we need to increase awareness of that. The splitting is a huge portion of object relations. You need to integrate that into a more healthier internal object relations. It's not two different people. It's one person. It's an aspect of themselves. Just because they did something to like upset you, it doesn't mean technically that you should hate them or that you just love them even less than you did. You need to be healthier when it comes to that. It is okay. It is just from experience that you had. Talk it over with the person. Say, hey, you said this to me. I didn't really like the way that you said that to me. And that shows that you had now worked on that internal object from what you had to go through as a child, but now in your current relationship, you should be working on healing from it so that you do not begin to use those defense mechanisms that you use to protect yourself in the first place. Now, view of change, insight, corrective emotional experiences, and the relational patterns that are formed in therapy. That is how change is going to be. But for object relations theory, the role of the therapist is crucial. The techniques that therapist works on is crucial with helping healing those internal objects that you have in your present day. Now, the therapist's role, insight oriented. In object relations, this is the only therapist that will allow countertransference and transference to enter into the room in order to help you heal. Okay? The key concepts, we have the introjection, projection, projective identification. If you have not watched my object relations video, please watch the object relations video. I go in depth to all of these different aspects. Okay? Assessment focus. Yes, object relations theories uses a genogram in the beginning. They look at those early attachment patterns and the intergenerational transmission of those object relations. Techniques and interventions. Again, I talked about this in my other object relations video. If you have not watched it, then go ahead and watch it, where I discuss how object relations draws from the psychodynamic theory. That's why you see some of those exploring defenses. Yes, in object relations theory, they talk about defense mechanisms. Another intervention that they use is also going to be free association, which is also drawn from the psychodynamic theory. Working through transference, uncovering internalized family roles, and exploring those emotions that come along with it. That relationship that therapist and that client has is to be the healthier object. The therapist has to be that good object in their life, because when they were growing up as a child in the world that they were in, they had two, which caused them to split themselves, good and bad. But like me, and I guess so many others, it's like the bad outweighed the good. So this therapist needs to be the good object to show them, hey, I get it. This is what you went through. This is what happened. But we are going to be working on healing, right? And then those are some of the typical questions that an object relations therapist might ask you in session. One of the famous examples of James Framo's intergenerational sessions is he would want the parents to come into therapy and to address some of those conflicts, which I thought was like pretty awesome because and I'm thinking about my own self. Would my father ever do that with me? Would he ever come into therapy and listen to me tell him how much I hated him as a child, how much he treated my mother, and why I did not like how he treated my mother? Alrighty, so if you still feel you have struggled with strategic, structural, and object relations, please let me know so that I can clear it up. I want us all to have an understanding of these theories, not just for the exam. If you ever wanted to apply these theories with your clients, you now have it to be a part of you and to integrate it with your clients that you are going to be working with. So let's do some questions. Of course, we're not going to just leave without doing some questions. This question, this is now the second time that I have put this question up here because I want everybody to have an understanding over this question. I know, I get it. This question says nothing about structural family therapy. And feel free to pause this video if you want to look at this question. This question is also in my other video that I did, so this is just like a review of this question. I get it. It doesn't say anything in this question about as a structural family therapist, but I want people to be able to notice how you can tell that this is a structural family therapy question. Sometimes, even if the vignette does not mention anything about the theory, if you look at some of those answer responses, it can possibly give you a hint as to what kind of question it is. When I first saw this question and I looked at this question, I was just like, well, what are they, like, wow, is that what happens at home? And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like the therapist now is just simply repeating or acknowledging that this is what this client has said. It has nothing to do with an emotional connection, so we can just do away with that. There is nothing about an emotional connection. Do not choose that. B says a way to join with the son. We know how you join. We know how to join with the client. That's not how you join with a client. So you would get rid of it. But when I saw B, that told me that this is a structural family therapy question. And then I was like, okay, well, which one of these is a structural family therapy answer? So then if you look at D, intended to normalize, I knew that was wrong, right? I knew that was wrong flat at the back. So I was like, just forget about it, get rid of that one. But then when I looked at C, I said, oh, okay, it's an interaction that they're talking about in that question, which led me to choose C. C was the only one that talked about the interaction, so that's how I came to find that C was going to be the best answer. Do you know that this is a structural family therapy question? Not until I finally looked and said, oh, it's tracking. That's what they're doing. Once I got rid of all those other responses, was like, well, that can't be it. That can't be it. I looked at that one and I was like, oh, it's tracking. That's what they're doing. If you haven't understand over these theories, these words, these phrases, these terms, whatever the case may be, you will be able to do just what I just did. That is what I want everybody to do. Okay? Let's look at another one. You've been conducting structural family therapy with newlyweds, Jules and Jordan, 18 sessions. They entered therapy having difficulty setting boundaries with their families and often became enmeshed with their parents' expectations. How will the therapist know when it is time to terminate therapy? Okay, this is another one of these goal question. When you see how would you know it's time to terminate, that means that they've met their goals. What goals are in structural family therapy? We just talked about them. Goals in structural family therapy are what? Altering, shifting, reorganizing the family structure. That's hierarchies, subsystems, boundaries. That is how you think when you see this kind of question. A says Jules and Jordan have improved their communication skills during disagreements. That is not enough. It's too minor because the goals in structural family therapy is not just improving communication skills. Too minor. Get rid of it. B says the stated number of sessions agreed upon has been completed. Well, we know that. That's not the goal of structural family therapy. Get rid of it. D says Jules and Jordan have healthy boundaries with their parents. Yes, no, but this question is not ultimately about the parents. This question is about Jules and Jordan. Yes, you have healthy boundaries with your parents, but what else happened within that system? Jules and Jordan have established, that's a word that you want to look for. Clear boundaries, strengthen. That's another goal word you want to look for. Their marital subsystem. This question was not really ultimately about the parents, although they had issues with the parents, but what about Jules and Jordan and their marital subsystem? That is all included in a goal for structural family therapy. Boundaries, the subsystems, making sure that the boundaries are clear in the within the system. It has to all be there. When you see questions like these, don't just go for just a minor answer. Make sure that answer is specific enough and it holds enough weight to match what is in those questions. Aaron and Trish come to see you because they have difficulty controlling their 6-year-old son, Liam. Within minutes of starting the session, Liam begins running around the room, knocking over furniture and shouting. The parents apologize but make no effort to stop him. A structural family therapist would most likely do which of the following in the early stage of therapy? Okay, this is one of your I need to know my phases of therapy. What happens in the early phase of therapy for a structural family therapist? That is how you're going to turn your brain on. When it comes to these questions on that exam, you might get a strategic question here, a research question next, back to a structural family therapy question, onto a cultural question, then a diagnosis question. Your brain is going to be like just going and going and going. Flip this one off, turn this flip on, turn this switch on and everything. You have to be ready in order to do that. Now we're switching to the early stage of therapy, but now we're in session and this kid has came in knocking over your furniture and shouting like he ain't got no home training. Now it's time for you to be like, oh, okay, I see what this is, but what can I do while we are in this session? Keep that in mind. A says, map interactions while guiding Aaron and Trish to respond to Liam in session. Okay, B says, observe the family from a distance without intervening to maintain neutrality. B, I would get rid of. Neutrality is never an answer or a word or phrase for structural family therapy. That's Milan. Get rid of it. C says, join with the family and focus on exploring the parents' childhood experiences to understand current parenting patterns. Now, the thing about C is, they put some, it's so nice. Isn't it written so nice with the join with the family? Because it's like the first early stage of therapy. But if you pay attention, it says explore the parents' childhood experiences. What do the parents' childhood experiences got to do with this kid in your office, ripping up your furniture, shouting in there like he's lost his mind? What does that have to do with anything? You know, structural family therapists don't dig in the past. Get rid of C. D says, discuss with Aaron and Trish about appropriate discipline strategies. Now, here's the thing. You can do that, but is that a structural therapy intervention? It's not. So you need to get rid of it. That's more like behavior, CBT, right? A is your best answer. Map interactions while guiding Aaron and Trish to respond to Liam in the session. A is the only one that includes in the session, because it's currently happening within the session. A is going to be your best answer. All right, see, now we're turning off our brains from structural to strategic right now. A mother brings her 5-year-old son, Johnny, to a local mental health agency. Johnny is having recurrent fantasies of being chased by home invaders and nightmares of running in terror to escape them. Oh my God, Halloween just ended. From a strategic family therapy perspective, what should the therapist do first? Okay, now, this is your first question. It ain't asking you what you're going to do in the middle or last. It's a first question. What is the very, very, very thing that you need to do after you just realized he's having recurrent fantasies of being chased by home invaders? And he's 5. He's 5 years old, right? A says, ask Johnny to describe the fantasies in detail to uncover the underlying problem sequence. Now, my thing about that one is, I mean, it seems like he's been traumatized, so are we going to re-traumatize this kid again by asking him to describe him? He already told you he's being chased by home invaders. Absolutely not. Get rid of it. B says, design a directive or paradoxical task to interrupt the pattern of fear and anxiety. I don't even think I looked over this question. What? No, that definitely can't be right. C says complete a family interaction assessment to identify sequences maintaining the problem. Okay, now that makes more sense. D says reassure the mother that the behavior is developmentally typical. Lady, at 5 years old, I was not dreaming about home invaders chasing me. So D is definitely out. We don't need to be reassuring any of our clients about any trauma that they've came into your session with. Absolutely not. C is your best answer. Complete a family interaction assessment to identify sequences maintaining the problem. This is the very first step you're going to do because B is moving too fast. Now we get a paradoxical task. We don't have enough information to do that just yet. And then A, of course, is asking him to describe the fantasies, and that's a bit much. He's 5 years old. He's 5 years old. We don't want to have to re-traumatize him, right? C is your best answer. Complete that assessment first and identify. Complete, assess, identify are your terms for like first things that you would do when it comes to a therapy session. 41-year-old Sherry, 43-year-old Dave, and their 14-year-old daughter Bella comes to family therapy because Bella's school performance is steadily declining. Sherry has a bruise on her cheek and a blackened eye. Further questioning reveals the presence of domestic violence in the family. Bella explains, my parents love each other, but sometimes they fight. They hit each other, but they never hit me or anything. As the session progresses, Dave becomes increasingly defensive and begins to yell at Bella about the real reason they are in therapy, which are her grades, while she is describing her view of the parents' situation. From a strategic therapy family perspective, the best course of action would be to do what? Now, this is one of your best course of actions. So we have a lot of information that is in this vignette right now, but typically best course of action questions is going to follow a pattern that you need to do to ensure that you are working effectively with this family. So if we go back to the question, we see that we have Dave and Sherry, they fight each other. Bella obviously is there witnessing what's going on with one another, but Bella has also said that they never hit her. Now, in session, Dave is becoming mad, he's becoming very defensive, and he's starting to yell in your office. So now you also have to do what? Protect the client, and you have to protect yourself. That is how you need to be looking at these answer responses before you choose the best one. A says interrupt the current interaction, separate the parents and the child, design individual interventions to stop the violent sequences, and protect the family members. I like how A sound, but let's take a look at all the others. B says separate the parents, reframe the conflict as a way to protect family members, encourage Bella to focus on her grades. The thing about B is it diminishes that there is some intimate partner violence going on, and the fact that Bella is also witnessing it, which means that Bella is also going to be deemed as, being under child abuse, and you need to make a call. If you have a child that is witnessing the abuse, you need to be calling Child Protective Services. If you see a question that says that the child is witnessing mom and dad fighting, you need to be looking for answer responses that also protects the victim and also protects the child. C says separate the child, assign the parents a paradoxical task to express their anger safely in front of Bella. When is it ever going to be safe to express anger in front of a child? That is just bonkers. Get rid of it. D says focus solely on Bella's academic performance. So now we're sitting over here worrying about Bella's math and English grades while mommy and daddy are fighting one another in front of Bella. Makes no sense. It's bonkers. Get rid of it. Not ever are we going to reframe conflict or reframe intimate partner violence as a way to protect family members. B is incorrect. Get rid of it. A is your best answer. You separate the parent, you separate the child. You do everything individually, but then you also pave way to the strategic family therapy perspective. By trying to attempt to do that, you're going to stop the violent sequences and protect all family members involved, leaving A being your best answer. All right, everyone, this is the last one. Tara has been in therapy for several months following the death of her 14-year-old son. She initially struggled with avoidance, withdrawal, and difficulty maintaining daily routines. Over the course of therapy, she has gradually re-engaged in work, begun eating regularly, and can enter her son's room without distress. From a strategic family therapy perspective, how would the therapist know when it is appropriate to terminate therapy? Alrighty, this is another one of these questions. We need to be looking at some of these goals of strategic family therapy in order to let us know it is time for therapy to come to an end, right? So we go back. She's several months. She deaf of her 13-year-old. She's avoiding withdrawal, difficulty to maintain daily routines, but now she's begun to re-engage in work. She's eating regularly, and she can go into her son's room without being stressed out about it. A says Tara reports feeling better and no longer expresses intense grief. I get it. We want to look at something that says something about grief that's in the vignette because she did lose her 13-year-old son, but that's not specific enough for a goal of strategic therapy. Get rid of it. B says the number of sessions originally agreed upon has been completed. Get rid of it. It does not pave way to the vignette. D says the therapist observes that Tara no longer cries during sessions. So the thing about it is, when it comes to termination, it is a collective thing. It has nothing to do specifically with just what the therapist deems to be true or what the therapist has observed. D is not right. Get rid of it. C says the maladaptive sequences maintaining Tara's avoidance and withdrawal has been disrupted, and she can consistently engage in daily routines. All of those words that are in there is your specifier for goals being completed in therapy and letting you know it is time for termination. C is your best answer. All right, everyone, thank you for rocking with me all the way through this. We are done with strategic and structural family therapy. We are one and done with it. If you still need help with it, please just put a post in the group and we can have a slight discussion on it, but we are done with it. We have got to move on to the other models. All right, everybody, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, please leave me a message. Please leave me a comment. Also, give me a super thanks. Just like I said, every bit of any donation that I get goes towards helping with more content and helping me continue with failing is not an option and getting people across that finish line. All right, everyone. Thanks.